Hi everyone and welcome to the Icehouse webinar. Today it is in partnership with our friends at Xero. We have David Bell, who is the Director of Business Growth at Xero. And today we're talking about what does it take to become data fit? How can getting curious about your business help you unlock potential? David Bell, Director of Business Growth at Xero, will discuss the massive opportunity for small businesses to improve their cash flow by using data to understand their performance. David will explain how to get into good habits that lead to better business outcomes. So thank you, David. We really appreciate you being here and on Small Business Day, which is exciting. So thanks for making the time.
Thanks, Briar. It's certainly exciting to be here on Small Business Day. What a great day to be actually having this conversation. It couldn't be more exact as to who are the important people and business owners in this market. So yeah, really encouraging.
Awesome. Very fitting. Well, go ahead, take it away.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending and taking this opportunity to learn a little bit more around cash flow, but in particular, some of the things that help with cash flow. And if I was to sort of start by my impressions, not just from my time at Xero, but I had a 20 odd years, but 14 years of career in banking, it is how much small business owners struggle with this. And I think we can relate to some other parts of our livelihood, such as diet and what's the right food to eat, or fitness and what we should do around keeping exercise up, and how that sort of, those things we all know are good for us actually become really hard to create a habit out of. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. Awesome. So I'll just start by sharing my slide deck for you, and we can go through that.
Perfect.
Okay. So the agenda that I'm looking at is NZ's cash flow position, where I'll just talk a little about the small business insights data that come out of the Xero platform, moving on into what I see and call getting data fit, and then just how to unlock some of that or use that data every day in making really good decisions each day within your small business. And then finally, how to build your own game plan. And I'm going to relate it back to some of the stuff that we see every day in market as individuals, not as business owners, and try to prompt you to think about that in what we do. So let's crack into it. The really interesting statistic is that 50% of the New Zealand business are cash flow positive, which is fantastic. That means you're making more money than you're losing. But the problem is that 50% are cash flow negative, which means they're not making enough to meet their daily requirements in what they do, which results in other sources of capital funding being required, which in itself isn't bad, but it can become a problem if it's sustained. And it becomes tricky to see where we're at in actually unlocking positive momentum in your business. So whilst the concept of a negative cash flow is not always a bad thing, it is something that definitely you should be aware of, and then as a result take action towards. So in order to how to get on top of that, what does it take to become data fit, and what do I mean by that? So that whole concept of eating well or taking regular exercise is something I think the huge industries have been built on, because it's really hard, and there is no small lack of recognition as to how hard maintaining your cash flow is, because of that acknowledgement that maintaining eating healthy, which we know is important, and exercising we know is important, is still all hard for us to do in our own personal lives. And I kind of want to start with the concept of what right we feel we have to criticize the best in the world. So let me just highlight a little bit of what I mean by that. How many times have you sat on the sofa at the weekend watching Super Rugby or the All Blacks, and you have screamed at the TV when you see a forward pass, or even the fact that the forward pass got away without the referees acknowledging its existence, etc. And we feel that as a individual sitting on our sofas, incapable of playing international rugby, that we have the right to criticize. And I still find that amusing. I do it myself, but I find it amusing that we feel we have that right. The more recent example was this crowd. So we've proven we're reasonably good at sailing, and we're pretty good at flying boats now as well. But we're still used to sit there and criticize these sailors when they fell off their foils or they couldn't get through a turn quickly, and we'd see all the data analytics that now the commentary teams in both rugby and the sailing have, that show the statistics on the boat and or in rugby and the tackle counts, etc. And I find, again, natural that we're critical. We have an expectation of these teams to perform at extraordinarily high level. But what we're actually doing is we're looking at huge amounts of data points and we're critiquing their business and their performance on that. My question to you would be is, how good are you at doing that? How good are you at analysing the data? So there are over 1,200 data points on that Emirates Team New Zealand boat there. All right, and we got the luxury of seeing those real time in the commentary teams and the commentary on it. And yet, how well do you do real time data to that extent and still sit there and critique yourself, or have a coach to critique yourself on it? And who is that coach to you as a business owner? Because let's remind yourselves, your livelihood depends on the success of that business, as does your family and potentially the team, and the team's families within it. So it's not a small piece to consider. I'm a Formula One fanatic. It's not necessarily because it's the most exciting of sports other than when they crash. But the thing that I find incredible about them is that they are businesses that are operating absolutely at the ultimate end of what they can do. There are so many people and things involved to make it happen, and yet on actually the day before race day, being a qualifying day, it can be up to thousandths of a second in a car that has many moving parts with different forms of petrol in different wind conditions on the track with a human being driving it, that makes the difference as to whether you win or lose. And that I find stunningly challenging and interesting, is the complexity of that outcome. And yet again, we can sit and go, well, that's boring. No, it's incredibly interesting as to how they use the data. This room here is actually the debrief room. And so after they've done the race, which takes 3 days to get to, plus all the prep to do it, they have a full 2-hour driver debrief afterwards. It's actually longer than the race itself, analysing the data immediately on what they've done to perform, so that when they go to the next race, they can look at improvement to the product, improvement to the team, and improvement to the driving skills of the people who are at the wheel. How often do you do that on your business, with a full team review on your performance at that level on real-time data immediately after the event? My suggestion would be almost never. You might do a weekly meeting, but you're not doing it in the heat of the moment, and certainly not when you can all remember exactly what happened with real-time data. And that's a really important factor. So with that, how do you unlock your cash flow? Look, to me, it's around doing the basics well. It starts with having systems that can give you that data, that unlock that cash for you, that information for you at your fingertips at all times. So I work for Xero. I'll talk about what Xero can do, but I will not make this exclusively to us. There are many tools of trade that can help a small business owner and yourselves get across the relevant data that you have, whether it be point of sale, e-commerce metrics, etc. But we'll start with what we know best here on cash flow at Xero. And it's things like making sure your reconciliation of your bank data goes into your accounting platform often. Some of your accountants may only do that, as I said, every 2 months based on your GST returns. That's driving blind at night and you're going to hit a tree, right? You can't make decisions on 2-month-old data. It's just impossible. So I'd encourage the things like using bank reconciliation, get that into your own hands, use the mobile app to make it happen. You can do it every morning. And in fact, we have one customer, one partner that we work with called We Accounting. They orientate themselves in the Pacifica community, where business literacy is something that they are continuously trying to improve. And they say, well, in the morning, you're pretty comfortable to pick your phone up, and I'm going to be a little bit graphic here, and go and do your morning routine in the toilet. And people will often now sit and go straight to Instagram or Facebook. And what she's trying to say is, not until you've done your daily rec. And I think that's pretty cool that's the sort of mentality that one of our accountants is trying to instill in the Pacifica community, is that bank rec should be done before you look at Instagram every morning. If that's on the toilet, that's on the toilet, and all be well with it. I was trying to encourage our marketing team that we should have Xero toilet paper that had tips and tricks on it, but our brand team didn't think that it was appropriate to have the Xero logo on toilet paper. But hey, we can still try. So those are just some simple habits that I think are good. Online invoicing, if you want to get paid nowadays in an environment where the life is just a little bit more challenging on the back of COVID, you need to make yourself simple to deal with. You need to be able to understand where your money is coming from, and you need to make sure that it's easy for you to get paid. So the amount of businesses that could get paid at the front door of a house. So you could be a landscape gardener that's finished a piece of work. Rather than sending an invoice, you could actually even send a receipt. You can, issue and receive payment at the front door of a house nowadays on a mobile phone. It is possible. So online invoicing, use pay now buttons, use payment gateways that allow you to be paid. We see people that use payment gateways get paid 12 days faster than those that don't. People who have the choice to whether to pay one person only are paying the person that is more simple to be paid. So use the tools that are available to make sure your money comes in. The other one is the other side of the ledger, which is around what you have to pay. So knowing who you have to pay and managing when you do it. So yes, there's a need for you to get paid, but it's also understanding that if you pay people on time, they're more likely in an environment today where supply chain is difficult. There are gaps in supply chains globally. Getting your product onto your shelves or whatever that might be, or to build the manufacture to the next level that you do, you need to make sure you get your supply. So making sure you pay people in a way that suits them and helps them is going to make you more likely to get your supplier product you need to do your business every day. So it's both sides of the ledger, who you pay and how you get paid. When you get that into a data position using the likes of our HubDoc product, where all that can be stored really easily, it's very easy to get all those payment pieces into place, as you start to get a full picture of both sides of the ledger of your cash flow. And until you do, it's really difficult to know what's coming up for you. So just encourage those basics around, bank rec, invoices, getting paid, and then knowing who you need to pay and the likes of HubDoc and how to do that. Once you do that, the visibility becomes cool. That side of things into the business account starts to come very visible on the Xero dashboard, which is probably the most basic version of where we have that visibility of your overall cash position. And so in that respect, I think it's a really cool place to start around cash in and cash out and what's coming. So basics are really, really important. But the next step is actually how to unlock that cash flow. And again, back to my old friends at the Formula One example, those debrief meetings are really important. And the way and the language I talk about this here is around getting curious. Curiosity is what makes you answer the questions you need to answer at the right time. And if you're not curious around the information you've got, you're probably not unlocking the greatest potential within your business. And that potential can be in really random places. The potential of how you get more productive, that helps you accelerate your outcome, how you can put your people in the right place at the right time, or how you utilize your capital in a more a productive manner. Those questions are stuff that you should be asking the whole time. And if you look at the way the likes of Lewis Hamilton, he's not a 7-time world champion by accident. Yes, he's in the fastest car, but that's because that business is relentlessly curious. And if you hear their dialogue in any of the media that comes out of it, you will hear that dialogue come through the whole time about their relentless curiosity to improve. And they're almost maniacal about it. And back to my statement, this is your family, your team's family you're working with. This is your livelihood. It's not something to be casual about. If you feel the right to criticize the rugby, you should criticize yourself. And if you don't know how to, get support. So we would advise, they have unbelievable strategists within these teams, all of the teams, whether it's All Blacks, Team New Zealand or Formula One. find yourself a decent coach, find yourself a decent critique. And whether that's your accountant, and we think accountants are doing some fantastic work out there, or a business coach, get one. Get one and use the data that is available to you to find out how to optimize your business, because it is that data that will help you do that and come to the next level. But you've got to have that curious mindset. I think it's pretty cool. I love being curious. I love asking ridiculous questions, because the more ridiculous you make them, once you've unpacked it all, it comes back to probably something that's a bit more realistic. If you listen to Grant Dalton talking about how they designed the Team New Zealand boat, what they talked about was throwing the ball way past the rules of the America's Cup, creating ridiculous questions that once they refined them back to reality, it was right at the boundary of what was the rules that they were allowed to play. And rather than sticking to the rules, once they built it, they would be short of them, and actually leaving some capacity constraint available. So I'd encourage you to ask ridiculous questions that stretch your mindset off the data that you see. What could I do with that? Wonder if, what would happen if? So get curious, and you will outperform those that don't. Okay, where do we go with this? So gathering information, making sure it's real time, understanding the products that you're selling, who's buying them, how often they're buying them, getting across how you contact them and talk to them, create conversations with them. Off the back of it, there are various tools around to do it. Our ecosystem is rich with over 800 capabilities that can help you do this. So the Xero platform is an open platform. On your permission, they can access the data if it's real time, and then help you make those decisions. So unlock your business through that. Building a genuine game plan, so having some understanding of what you want to get to, and then the gaps that you have. So ask yourselves, how many of you have a definitive strategic plan and a definitive business plan? They are different. Business being more 12 months and operational. Strategic plan is your where you want to aspire to, and more of your purpose and mission. I am stunned every day by the amount of people that don't have either. I would suggest 80% plus of the people I speak to in market don't have either. And if I ask them, where do you want to be in 3 years? Or I use a phrase, as a person with gray hair, what do you want to be when you're grown up? It's amazing how many people don't know, and how many people don't have a plan for what they do and meander through and wonder why things go off track. So make sure you genuinely have a plan, and that it's a living plan with somebody who holds you accountable. And that's back to that coach, rather than being shouted at by a spectator. So then with those business plans is, how do you forecast where you're going to be? And so using like our business snapshot tool that we have past the game plan is just an example of something that we're looking at. So we have short-term cash flow, 30-day cash flow forecasting tools. There are other tools in our ecosystem which go out further, such as Futurely, and that you can work with, that will give you the answers to what you can do. These tools give you an ability to gauge where your performance is versus the business plan you have early. And that word is really important. If you don't know where you are early, and when I say back to what some accountants are doing, where they only do your reconciliation every 2 months, is that's not early enough. Things can go really wrong in that period. And if you look at the fact that 50% of cash flow negative, some only have 3 months of runway. So if you're 2 months behind, you've got a month to sort something out, which isn't long at all. Hence hitting trees, as I've described. So I'd encourage you to be looking at this often, looking at your gaps to your plan, understanding where you're performing early, and then making definitive and informed decisions on how to take a different route. The alternative is when you're actually doing really well. There are some businesses out there who have managed to negotiate COVID extraordinarily well, who may or may not have either put themselves or are in the right place at the right time based on what's going on. And it's, how do you take advantage of a moment in time? So we talk about cash flow negativity, but cash flow positivity is as big an opportunity or situation, and it's knowing what to do with the money that you have and how you can take the next step. And that can be giving yourself a greater lifestyle. The classic Kiwi boat batch and BMW mentality, but it can also be buy the business next door, expand offshore, and create a new product line. It can be achieving the dream that you had that you never thought you could. So the positive side of the ledger is exciting as the concern of the negative side of the ledger, and knowing what to do in those situations, or asking yourself. So definitely get on top of your data and look at it that way. So the short-term cash flow tool is a really exciting capability, and there are partners out there for long-term, and I'd encourage you to look at it. So these are some of the things that I feel are really important around cash flow. It is something that, first of all, I would recognize as being really hard. It is something that people don't often like doing. It can be considered boring. It's a menial habit that people don't like doing, such as not eating bread as often as you would like to, etc. So back to fitness and health, they are hard to maintain, but they reward you if you do. So acknowledgement that it's difficult, but it is a pretty good outcome if you do it. Doing it in a real-time environment is really good. So making sure that you use the tools to get the right information in there so you can make the right decisions in real time. Then having a plan, understanding what you need to do and where you want to get to, both short and long term, and having somebody that can advise you and hold you accountable is really, really important. And that accountability is something I would encourage you to have. Whether it's your board, strategic advisor, or even just a friend, it's something that's really important. And then finally, use the tools to then benchmark yourself against your plan. So those cash flow tools that are available to you, and other tools around your customer performance and customer engagement are really important. So that's my sort of summary of where I feel cash flow is. It's an awesome tool. It's an awesome concept, and is actually, to me, the underpinning of all good businesses if they're done well.
Amazing. I'm so glad I was on mute, because there were a lot of laughing at times. There was a lot of wow and aha moments. So thank you, David. Yeah. I appreciate that, and love the connection between sport and health and that sort of thing too, being consistent. So yeah, really appreciate that. And thought it was really cool what you said around sort of being able to make decisions in the heat of the moment, and so making sure you're keeping that really up to date. So brilliant. I've got a couple questions here, general questions from the community and from myself, and some of them you've definitely covered, so maybe it's just more of sort of summarizing them together. But first one here is, what are some early signs of cash flow problems?
I think it's some really, I'll be a little bit different, because I mean the obvious one is you don't have money in the bank account when you go to pay. So the first maybe is the bank manager phoning you with an overdraft fee, that an unapproved overdraft fee, and you go oops, and they can get pretty expensive and annihilate your credit rating really quickly. And trust me, I've done it myself, so it happens. So that may be the most obvious awakening point, but just things like if you're looking at inventory starting to pile up on shelves, is an idea that cash flow might be going off. Now you can do that by looking and walking, or you can do it through data that is in your pocket anytime, any place. Understanding the basket size of your customer sales. So if you have an average size of customer sale that starts to decline, then you know what's going on. So I mean, as simple as revenue numbers, but actually even into smaller, more niche data points is really important. So being on top of the front end of the journey as to where your revenue streams, making sure you get paid. So no one likes phoning up and chasing invoices. It's actually a pretty miserable task. There are tools that can help you, but it's critical. You can't move forward if you don't understand who owes you money. The flip side of that is also being really cognizant of paying people. Again, I think that helps, because it starts to affect your product supply.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. Cool. Next question here is, how do I do a cash flow analysis? Are there any Xero tools that can help with cash flow in general? Obviously, you've shown us some.
Yeah, I've told it to you. So, I mean, you can't do cash flow forecasting without the data being this. The first thing is get the data in the system, both sides of the ledger, both the receivables and the payables. And there is the tax component part of that as well. And some systems are better at others that have that. But get as full a picture as you can. Even if you don't have a full picture, it'll still give you an indication. So it may not be bulletproof, but it'll start to give you a trend. So do what you can, because doing something is better than nothing. But be careful that, without a full picture, you are starting to get to the point that you might make some wrong decisions.
Yeah.
So the second part of that is definitely get somebody to coach you. So everyone that you ever watch on TV that is the best at what they do has a coach, whether you're the violinist in an orchestra, whether you're Adele as a singer, she is a voice coach, whether you're a Formula One driver, Tiger Woods, you name it, doesn't matter. They have a coach. Get a coach. And someone who will ask you the question is really important.
Yeah, and we love that, because at the Ice House we have business coaches on hand, and love to make sure that if a business owner's finished a program with us, that they don't just stop there, but they get ongoing coaching. So that is awesome. Thank you, David. Last question I've got here is, why is cash flow so important? A simple one, but an important question.
It's your central nervous system. It's your blood. It's if you don't have it, and it's the stuff that sometimes your heart beats, hopefully, and you kind of rely on it to happen. But when it doesn't, it's usually quite fatal, right? So that is why it's so important to do, and you can't underappreciate that something that seems really basic is actually probably the most important thing. And whilst it's exciting to go and do acquisition and find the next deal or do a social marketing post or whatever, if you don't have the heartbeat and the central nervous system working, you don't have a business. And then unfortunately, the well-being consequences of that are profound. And we're pretty passionate about well-being here at Xero. Business well-being comes from great cash flow management, or certainly if you don't have it, it will affect your well-being. So we see it as being critical.
100%. That's great. Awesome. I also love what you said about get curious. Make sure you're actually getting into the nitty-gritty. You're asking the big questions. I think that's so important. Sometimes even we see as business owners, they're scared to ask questions, and the fear of looking like they may not have it all together or whatever, but just ask the out there questions. I love that.
We're a strange beast, humans, aren't we? So when we're young, we ask a million questions. So those of you with kids out there will know the car journey when, Dad, what's this? Why and why and why? And it's like, don't ask me why again, you little. So we train ourselves out of asking questions. Kids ask questions all day long. The minute we get into a point of responsibility and accountability, we think it's not okay to ask questions. It's completely the reverse. We should be asking questions now, because we can actually make a difference in our roles of responsibility and as business owners. But we have this, as you said, this strange sort of, facade that it's not okay to not know something. I think it's really cool not to know something. I think that's the opportunity that's ahead of you. So being curious about stuff and constantly learning is the only way that you will get better, do something more simply, or achieve something more wonderful, is by asking questions you don't know the answer to.
That's great. Thank you, David. And felt captivated that whole time, which is a win. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure our watchers are as well. So thanks for your time and talking to us all about cash flow today.
Thank you very much indeed. It was an absolute pleasure.